We're going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube, and also rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. What is going on? We're a day late, but hey, data deep dive. We have to go through it. We got to talk about all the different stats, the advanced metrics about what happened last game, and talk a little bit deeper about also kind of what we saw on tape, and does that match what the stats are also saying about this as well. So if you haven't already, go out on YouTube. We have 3 hours of tape watch. Literally, we went through every single play. So today I want to talk a little bit about that. We'll actually first kind of talk about the top grades and also kind of how that correlates to what we saw, because not everyone can spend 3 hours watching tape with us. So we'll kind of talk about that, and then we'll break down Caleb Williams and talk about the advanced metrics there. And then in running, receiving not too much, but offensive line, defensive line, and coverage. So first, let's get into the top graded players and the worst graded players. So first off, we'll talk about the offense. And when we broke down the tape, it was basically Caleb Williams was under pressure a whole bunch. And also when you look at the metrics, it agrees with that as well, with a 50% pressure rate, which was second highest last week. But 50% pressure rate, you don't want to see that. Now, even though that he held onto the ball, he had the 9th slowest time to pressure, which was 2.72 seconds, and also had a sack percentage of 11.5, which was actually 5th. So sacked a decent amount of times. Overall, I liked what Caleb Williams did. And if we look at the if we look at the PFF grades, this is his highest PFF graded performance that we've seen, and at a 65.6. But when we were watching the tape, the other players that stood out to us, we also liked DeAndre Swift. We also thought Roschon played well. Those were the other players, specifically on the offensive side. We thought the running backs played well. We also thought that, hey, Rome Odunze was getting open a decent amount of times. But when you look at the PFF grades, just so we're curious, the above average players, DeAndre Swift had the highest grade at 70.8, DJ Moore at 67.5, Roschon Johnson at 67.4, Caleb at 65.6, and Braxton Jones at 67.2. Right now, everybody just flipped the table. They're like, what? And if somebody watched it, you know why. If someone watched the tape, we are kind of curious. And I saw this, I'm like, what the heck? Because he constantly was getting pushed back. It wasn't because of his pass block grade, which was a 52.4. It was actually his run block grade at 84.6, where they weighted a little bit heavier and ultimately came away with one of those higher grades. So it was not his pass block grade. Don't worry. But the run block grade, and when I think about that with the tape, we weren't looking that closely. We're trying to go through absolutely everything. It wasn't bad. I wouldn't say it was bad, but it didn't strike me as an absolutely incredible performance by Braxton Jones. But I still go, Braxton in the run block, he's solid. He really is solid. And we'll talk about more metrics that actually point favorably to Braxton Jones in the run blocking game, as opposed to his pass blocking. And I'll also have another one for those that for some reason want to have doom and gloom. Those people, don't worry, I got you. We have a pass blocking stat that you'll be like, all right, this is what we saw. And it just kind of shows how bad, how close people were to the quarterback when they were going against Braxton Jones. But let's flip over to the worst offensive grades, where it's basically all of our offensive linemen. Tevin Jenkins leads the way at a 42.9 grade. Because honestly, when we were watching him, nothing crazy. I believe he let up one pressure. And so that's why you see a 26.6, because he only had five pass blocking snaps and one bad snap. So that's going to weigh you down significantly. That's just the way that the grading goes. But also we saw the screenplay. So for those that didn't see, there's a screenplay that basically they're throwing to the left-hand side. If Tevin's out there and makes the block, it's a 30-yard completion. It's a 40-yard completion. He kind of sits back, and then the guy just ends up drilling DJ Moore. And then ultimately, nothing ends up happening on that play. So Tevin, we were not impressed with, and I wouldn't say it was a 42.9 type of grade, but overall, I mean, it was only 11 snaps. Then Rome, I don't like this. Rome had the second worst grade at 49.6. I thought that Rome looked pretty good out there. I thought he looked smooth. I liked a lot of his routes. Like I paused it and I really liked some of his routes. So I disagree with this. His run block grade is 36.1, which, hey, he doesn't know how to run block. I've seen, like, he's not a great run block. He's no Equanimous St. Brown. But then we continue to go down. Coleman Shelton and Nate Davis at 50 grades. I'm glad they got the same because when we were watching the tape, didn't look great. Tripped over each other, some bad little pieces. But hey, they gave Nate Davis an 80.5, which I actually kind of agree with. Nate Davis was not bad in the pass game. Like, he really wasn't. It was the run game where they're giving him a 42 that I totally agree with because he never got to the next level. There were so many plays that it did not look good in the run game. Yeah, Shelton just looked bad overall. Matt Pryor, I thought he had a pretty good game. He got beat a couple times in pass blocking, but they're giving him a 54.7. We'll dig deeper into that. Mercedes Lewis, 55.5. They liked his pass blocking, but nothing much else. Gerald Everett, 56.3. Cole Kmet, 58.3. And Darnell Wright, they loved his pass blocking, which as soon as I saw this, I'm like, what the heck? They loved his pass blocking at a 73.7. In the run blocking, they thought it was okay at 63.6. So I don't know why it's a 58.7. The grades, it's not just like a basic math of like add them together, divide by 2. They have their own little like weight to all that stuff. But yeah, he's just borderline okay with that, which I think that he was a little bit better. I was expecting his grade to be more so in the 60s, which his individual grades were. But overall, yeah, not so much. But if we flip over to the defense, I'm purposely also taking a little bit of extra time to talk through this just for those that didn't see all the tape stuff. So yeah, that you don't have to watch it, but if you want to, you can. It's still very beneficial. But in the defense, your above average players, Montez Sweat at 76, TJ Edwards at 75, Brisker at 71, Jack Sanborn at 67.8, Kyler at 67, Jervon at 66.5, Jalen at 64.7, and Andrew Billings at 63. The only thing that I'm kind of like, I thought was going to be lower was Montez Sweat. I didn't think he had an amazing game. I didn't think he was bad, right, by any stretch, but the highest graded player on the defense, I wasn't really thinking that. I thought Jalen was fantastic. He was always tight on his receiver. TJ Edwards had a great game. Like when we were watching this, he was going past his players. TJ Edwards was so good in that run defense. And also Jaquan Brisker had a phenomenal game as well. So the tape backed it up. And Kyler we didn't love from a run defense. And looks like his coverage was what gave it to him. Because 78.8 coverage grade, 46.5 run defense grade. So on the tape, yeah. And then Jervon, I don't know how he got a 66.5 because all of his grades are less than that. But Jervon, to me, actually, he made a couple big plays, and maybe that's what kind of elevated it, because I know they have weighted plays. Jervon had big splash plays. Everything else, like, to me, I wasn't super impressed with his overall game. Like with the tape, the overall game wasn't like it wasn't bad, but it was just kind of like okay. So a couple big splash plays for him. That's why I thought Jalen would be a little higher. Billings I really liked. Wasn't his best day of run defense. He made a splash play, but he wasn't like holding the line. But then if we flip over to the worst, Tremaine Edmonds, we said this when we were watching tape. I thought that there was a couple really bad plays by Tremaine Edmonds, but also he made a couple really good plays when they were running more of that outside zone. I thought when it was inside, he struggled because he was out of position. He put himself out of position. He was getting pushed back a little bit much, but on the outside plays, he was getting there. So I think 29.8, which is terrible, is a little bit harsh. But also Chris Williams, I see that he was getting pushed back. Same thing with Byron Cowart. And also DeMarcus Walker. I really liked some of his plays, but his grade actually is, like when I first saw this, I was a little taken back. But then I realized when we were watching the DeMarcus Walker tape, his run defense, he was getting pushed back a lot. He was getting pushed back consistently. When we were talking about, like, we were asking the question when we were live, we were saying, well, why is he getting, well, why is this running attack so effective against the Bears? Well, it's because everybody was being pushed back. Everyone was being pushed back, and they were able to get to the next level, and that's ultimately why they were able to give up so many yards against backup offensive linemen. DeMarcus Walker really didn't hold his own. He made a couple good plays to kind of get off his guy, but also he was phenomenal when we were watching the pass rush. He was consistently getting pass rush on the quarterback, which you see with the 71 grade. So Austin Booker, the only other one that he wasn't like beating his guy, but he's just a hard worker. And so I get his tackle grade, but I think a 46.9, a little rough. So we went through the grades a little bit, a lot, for the first 10 minutes, but I wanted to break that down and also kind of talk about what we saw on tape. Because now let's talk a little bit more about Caleb Williams and a little bit more about the advanced stats. But first, where did we end up on the overall, the power rankings and other things like that? So not your classic, hey, I am, person from NFL Network or ESPN, and I built my own power ranking, right? This is from PFF grades, DVOA, efficiency ratings, and also Football Power Index. So when you look at where the Bears are at, 26 for PFF, DVOA has us 23rd, efficiency 18, and 22 in Football Power Index. So yet again, still kind of back early 20s is kind of, the low 20s is kind of our vibe, but that's kind of how we've been played. We're 2-2. Then on the offensive side, we got better in a lot of the grades, but still 29, 30, 27, and 27. And then defense has gotten moved down a significant amount, with the PFF grades in DVOA going to 10 and 12. But also the efficiency grades still at 4, and Football Power Index still has actually moved us down 1 to the second spot. Now, honestly, when I look at this, I kind of agree with PFF and DVOA, where we're starting to go and kind of be that outside of the top 10 because of just how this run defense is and how it's been performing. It hasn't been great. So, yeah, I think that this is a top 10 defense, but they need to get that run defense fixed. They need to get that better. And then for those that want to know special teams, it's literally all over the place. 24 for PFF, 6 for DVOA, 21 for efficiency, and 7 for FPI. Everywhere. Just literally, who knows? Who knows his special teams, ladies and gentlemen? But let's go over to the actual passing that we wanted to start talking about. And really, when we look at this week, Caleb Williams was really kind of like in the middle of everything. He was 17 out of 32 for EPA, 20 out of 32 for passing EPA, and also 15 of 32 for rushing EPA. So really right in the middle. As we talked about in the post game, 2.98 average time to throw, which is actually the 11th longest, and also 3.6 air yards per completion was the 6th shortest, and 7.6 intended air yards is basically average. And the reason why we bring this up, and we'll repeat this again, we are trying to push the ball deep. When you look at his kind of where he's throwing the football to, if I find it, we don't take too many deep shots. But with those deep shots, I think we've only completed 2 all year. This game, it was 0 for 4. Not pretty, not good at all. But everything else was pretty much money. He only missed 1 other pass that wasn't past 200 yards. So very, very, very efficient, but it's those deep passes that just don't look good. And if you look at from PFF, his passing grade when throwing deep, 41.7 last game, but everything else, 89.3, which is borderline elite. From 10 to 19, and then short and behind a line of scrimmage is all above average. So very good, right? But it's that deep ball, which is ironic because that was kind of his calling card, was bombing it deep, throwing this crazy stuff. But also what we continue to see, just natural improvement. 10.9% completion percentage over expected last game, which was 4th out of 32 qualified quarterbacks. So what does this all say? this backs up what we've seen on tape. This backs up everything that we're seeing. Caleb's not bad. Caleb is getting better. He's progressing. It would be alarming if we saw the same crap and the same bad that we were seeing, from week 1. Caleb is getting better. Caleb is progressing. And I don't think that that's okay. Different people learn different ways. And this feels like he's getting ready for an NFL offense, and he's still learning, and he's still this is what happens with a rookie quarterback. Simple as that. But also what we saw was 23% play action, also a 19.2% screen pass game. So as we know, lots of screens that we're throwing out there, and also some decent amount of play action, because also they were loading the box a lot, which we really haven't seen too much. Where with the load the box numbers, of course, I know that I had this. It was around 34%. About a third of the time, they were loading the box against the Bears. So it was the 6th highest rate of stacked boxes. So they were kind of daring them to throw, and that's where we were able to still throw the football. On the flip side, the running attack, as we know that they were loading the box, it was one of the best games. And like we've said, DeAndre Swift, he's always been dancing. And keep in mind, his other efficiency ratings have been 9, 10, 11, 3.3 this week, which was the 11th most efficient running. So that's, how many yards are you running to just get a couple of yards to just kind of move it? DeAndre Swift was doing a lot less dancing in the backfield that we saw on tape. There were still a couple, you can still see that what he wants to do is, if things start to break down a little bit, rather than just try to get the yards, he's going to try and power through. He's going to try to go around rather than power through. So that's kind of his thing. But also 31.25 8-defender boxes, which is not 7th lightest. It was actually, I think, the 7th heaviest. It was a heavy set of people in the box, but also 2.76 seconds behind the line of scrimmage, which was the 9th quickest, as opposed to him always being one of the slowest behind the line of scrimmage, one of the fastest behind the line of scrimmage, and also 1.58 rush yards over expected per attempt, which was the 7th best. Over that, keep in mind too, the previous weeks, that's been -2, that's been -3, that's been -4. It's been terrible. But DeAndre Swift, good game. We're going to have to see if he can continue to do something like this. That was a poor tackling team that we were going against, so he does need to kind of just continue to show what he can do. The only other stats I kind of want to throw out there, passing was a 0.04 EPA per play, which was actually 12th, and then also running was 0.02 EPA per play, which was good for 10th. Also, another thing too was that the stuffed rate for the offensive line. So basically, when the running game basically essentially breaks down and then they just get stuffed at the line, they actually had one of the best stuff rates at 7.1%, which was 3rd best. So that means 93% of those plays at least had a chance. And we did kind of see that there was a couple that did in fact break down, but you still kind of saw at the next level, we still don't get to that next level and make those blocks, because when we are watching the tape of the Rams offensive line versus the Bears offensive line, the Bears offensive line just doesn't seem to just kind of block and then take on the next guy. They just kind of block and stay on the guy, and then somebody makes a play. So overall, that's kind of the running game truly all together. But let's see this offensive line, because we had a couple little stats that we wanted to break down with this offensive line besides that stuff rate. We talked about the 50% pressure rate. We talked about the 11.5 sack percentage, which was the 5th worst. So lots and lots of bad stuff. And the PFF grades also back it up, like we've been mentioning. Matt Pryor with the 54.7, Coleman Shelton with the 50 grade, Nate Davis with the 50 grade, Darnell Wright with the 58 grade, and Braxton Jones giving you the best grade at 67 because of that run blocking. But like I teased earlier on in the episode, I want to kind of back up the reasons why, at least and I don't know why, but I guarantee you a lot of you that saw that Braxton Jones was the highest graded Bear probably got a little mad. don't be mad at me. I'm just the messenger telling you the stats. The thing that I want to bring up too, he allowed 5 pressures for an efficiency rating of 90.4, which is terrible because normally it's around 95% is kind of okay at the tackle position. 90.4 is really bad. So that's why you see the pass blocking grade not being so hot. But then also when you look at it as well, and you look at their overall defensive line, Jared Verse. So keep in mind, an average yards of separation for a defensive lineman with the quarterback is 4.57 per snap. Jared Verse was averaging 2.96 yards away from the quarterback per passing snap. That is really, really bad when you look at that with Darnell Wright, because Verse was basically going against Darnell Wright all game. But you look at this too. Braden Fisk was at 4.06. So yet again, or closer than the league average. Kobe Turner, 4.27, closer than the league average. Hote, closer than the league average in 4.43. So everybody was closer to Caleb Williams than anywhere else. And the tape backed that up. Like they were always all over him. Consistently, they were all over Caleb Williams. And that's why you see the pressure rate being high. That's why you see everything else. Like with the passing snaps, it wasn't great. And the only people that we said that looked good in passing snaps really were Nate Davis and Darnell Wright. So I agree with the at least the passing grade for the PFF grades, because yeah, that's kind of how it was. Like, it wasn't great except for 2 people. And, kudos to Nate Davis for at least holding up in the passing game. But yeah, in the running game, there's a couple snaps where, when we talk about getting stuffed at the line, it could have been better, because basically what was happening was Nate Davis took off and went to a different person. So, yeah, the offensive line, not pretty overall. But let's also talk about the defensive line, where honestly, it wasn't that pretty either. Because also too, everyone that's out there, like the offensive line, like there's not really much to talk about receiving wise, because DeAndre Swift was our number 1 receiver. So there's really not a lot of receiving stats that I can really go through. So let's talk about this defensive line, because like I said, when I was watching the tape, I wasn't super in love with what Sweat was doing. I thought that Javon had his moments, right? Yet again, not saying what Javon did was bad, but it wasn't like an unbelievable game by any means. And you look at the numbers too, it kind of backs that up. Because I always felt like on their side, they never really got much pressure. They never really were like pushing the pocket. And the numbers validate what my feelings were. Javon Dexter, 5.33 yards away from the quarterback, which was 4.57 is league average. So almost a full yard away from that. Montez Sweat, 4.75, farther than average. But then Billings and Walker were the only ones that were less than average, in a good way, with Walker being 3.97 and Billings being 4.01. Both of those kind of validate how I felt. Those were the 2 best pass rushers, it seemed, when we were watching the tape, and it does back that up, with Walker having one of the better pass rush grades at 71.2, and also Andrew Billings at 68.6. And you look at their pass rush win rate, according to PFF, DeMarcus Walker, 24%, Javon Dexter, 9.1%, Montez Sweat, 15%, and Andrew Billings, 11.8%. Now, Darrell Taylor, 7.1%, and also Chris Williams, 7.7%. I don't have Taylor's numbers away from the quarterback, but Taylor was another person that was actually very impressive when rushing the passer. He was the only other person that we saw consistently around the quarterback, which, Taylor, keep doing your thing, right? Like, he was doing a very, very good job at just continuously creating some pressure. But also, like, if we flip over to the overall grades, going over, the overall win rates according to ESPN Advanced Analytics, what we have is Andrew Billings is, from the defensive tackle side, is number 3 with what they are giving a 20% pass rush win rate, and they're giving Javon Dexter a 17% pass rush win rate. Why them and PFF aren't the exact same is different. But this pass rush win rate too that I'm giving you from ESPN, that is across the entire season, not just one game. So Javon Dexter too is tied for 6th place out there. But also another little fun fact from the defensive side, Darrell Taylor is also still 7th best at the defensive end spot at a 28% pass rush win rate on the season. But also, when we're talking about the offensive line, there was one other stat that I failed to mention about this line. And for the people that don't like Braxton Jones, you're not going to like this. But yet again, this goes to the whole thing of like, he's not a bad run blocker. and he gives up ground in the pass game. Like, I'm not fighting that. ESPN Advanced Analytics has him as the 5th best run block win rate in the NFL at 82%. So they really like him. And also, we've said this when we're watching tape, he doesn't get a lot of help either. A lot of the other people are getting 2 people, with them. He's only been had help 24% of the time, which is actually substantially low when you're talking about a single person out there in the run game. So Braxton Jones, still a pretty good run defender from a lot of the other metrics that are out there. Also, if we flip over to the defense, so now a little bit more advanced metrics from the last game. EPA per rush was 0.11, which was the 6th worst. And then if we look at EPA per pass, it was negative 0.13, which was the 13th best. We had 0% stacked boxes. We always had 2 high safeties. So we were daring them to run the football, which they were. We also had a 21.9% pass rush pressure rate, which was 6th worst. Also 5th worst get-off rate at 0.96 seconds. So not firing off the ball very quick. 4th best yards after catch over expected at -12. And then also 9.5% QB pressure rate and a 9.1% a pressure rate as well. WB, I'm trying to remember what that was. That was for, Javon Dexter. So Javon at least kind of getting out to that quarterback. And then I think the other 9.5% QB pressure rate, I think that was just like as a team overall. That was, I think that was one of the individuals. I didn't jot it down, so I'll get those things a little bit later. But also, so let's go into the more advanced metrics as well. Let's go into the coverage grade, where our average target separation was 3.9 yards, which is actually 8th worst. So unfortunately, people had space around them, and we saw that also on tape, where this is kind of that whole bend don't break mantra that the Bears do have, where a lot of people had a lot of open space, especially because we were running a lot of zone coverage. People were able to get in between. But when we were watching the tape, Tyreek Stevenson definitely was given up the most when it was in man coverage, and that's why you see a 55.3 grade. So I do agree with that. It wasn't a great coverage game for him, and this is what we know, ups and downs. Even though 4 for 7, still the coverage was not the best out there. I was a little surprised to see that Jalen's was at a 66.5 because he always seemed to be on his guy. And maybe that was because of the zone coverage or other things like that. But Kyler Gordon, 78.8, thought he had some good coverage out there as well. And then Tremaine Edmonds allowing 4 catches on 5 targets for 46 yards. Average ADOT of 6.6 yards, so pretty far back. But TJ Edwards' average depth of target was -0.5. So really kind of holding the people at the line of scrimmage at bay. So some little bits of advanced metrics out there for y'all. A little bit more than what we normally do, just talking about the Bears and what we saw on tape. Because for all those that are out there audio only, I wanted to give you a little bit of what we've been talking about with the 3-hour-long show. Also, for the people that watch the show, it's a 3-hour-long show. I don't expect all of y'all to be watching that. So I wanted to kind of encapsulate it all and bring it all together in this data deep dive / tape review, all that stuff. So hope y'all appreciated that, and make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube. Rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.